Hello and welcome to Car Dealer Live. I'm James Baggott, I'm the founder of Car Dealer magazine, and today I'm delighted to be chatting to Martin Forbes, President of Cox Automotive International. Good afternoon, Martin.
Afternoon, James. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Thank you for joining us. So I'm going to give you a little intro here for people who don't know you. I'm sure there's not many of them out there. Martin was previously CEO of Cox Automotive UK, but in May became the president of Cox Automotive, where he looks after the UK, Europe, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Brazil. That's quite a portfolio you've got there, and there's probably a lot of air miles if you were allowed to do them, Martin. We're going to be talking today about the launch of the business's third Insight report, put together with the help of Grant Thornton Automotive. Lots to chat about there. But firstly, Martin, you've had a very varied career researching this this interview. I look back at some of your past, and you've had some fantastic job roles. I mean, perhaps we could just talk a little bit about that and your experience in the automotive industry first.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I have to say, first of all, the automotive industry is almost infectious. I mean, that's what I've found. I mean, my background, I'm ashamed to say I'm an accountant. And dare I say, I'm a tax accountant. So some might look at it as the worst kind, but I was always working and advising sort of how best to sort of save tax and all the rest of it. So that was sort of background. And then from there, I actually went into digital media.
Yeah.
And I had a digital media background. I helped set up a startup that we actually went to a global into many different countries. And from there, actually went on to sort of more film production and digital media creative agency world. And then got a phone call one day to say, we'd like to talk to you about an opportunity with a company called Manheim. And Cox Automotive wasn't really so much of a brand in the UK at that point. That was more established in the US. And I'd heard of, I hadn't heard of Manheim, looked it up, car auction business. And I'll be honest, James, I did sort of sit there and scratch my head and say, have you got the right person? Why would a car auction business want to be talking to me? But I think what happens is with most people, once you understand who we are and what Cox Automotive is about, we're obviously much more than just what might be seen as a traditional car auction business. And I'd obviously had experience of the Cox brand in the US through their media business. And that's what kind of got me excited. So that sort of started my journey into the automotive. And I originally came in really to run their retail and media business. And you would know brands like, at the time, it was motors.co.uk. We had a lot of the brands like, it was Portfolio for Cars originally, where we used vehicle locators, which is now Modix. And so I came in more with a media digital slant, and then effectively grew across the rest of the business to get more involved in all the other areas that we work across, which, as you well know, is pretty much across the whole ecosystem. Yeah,
and I'm sure that digital background has really paid dividends, hasn't it? Especially during this time of coronavirus, when everything has become digitized. Has it helped you?
Well, I mean, it certainly has, because I think I've got far, I guess, more in-depth understanding of what it takes to sort of run or think about a digital process. Importantly, putting yourself in the lens of a consumer, or even further, we like to put ourselves, I guess, in the lens of a dealer that then needs to put their lens through into a consumer, and understanding how you engage in a digital process. And I think one of the biggest things I took away, even when I worked in digital, and it's fundamental to where we are today, and maybe we come on to it, we talk about it in our Insight report, is, this is all about a digital era, as you said. We've speeded up those digital trends. The most important thing in any industry was always that balance of offline and online. And how do you get that element of seamless blend between an offline and online experience? And I think that has been and will continue to be incredibly important and point of focus for the automotive industry and certainly our retailers.
So let's focus on that a little bit, Martin, because I'm fascinated to hear your opinion on online car sales. The way you can look at it at the moment, there's some people throwing the absolute kitchen sink at online car sales. You look at Kazoo today, and we've written a story about how he's taking a bit of a swipe at car dealers, really traditional car dealers. Whereas on the other hand, you've got car dealers who are purely operating at the moment via a digital space because of lockdown. What do you think is the future for these online sales? Are people in the future purely going to be buying cars online, or will there always be that blended approach you've mentioned?
Look, I think look, there's a definite trend that people and more people are willing to buy a car from start to finish online. We are seeing that come through. Doesn't matter whether you're in the UK or whether we're talking about that in the US market or other markets we operate. We are seeing that trend, but we need to be careful. We can't get carried away with it. Even when we look at studies in the US, by 2025, we're probably saying that you'd expect maybe somewhere between 25 and 30% of car transactions, maybe on an online environment. But we need to be really important, James, about what we determine to be and what we call online. Because people might say that they've sold a car through an online channel or what they class as digital retail. But have they seriously taken that from research all the way through to their Partex digitally, all the way for their car being delivered, their finance, everything, a full online experience? Or has part of that journey been actually transacted or undertaken like by going in and seeing a car? Or have they gone actually and spoken to the dealer before they do that? And this is where we talk about that online, offline trend. I've got a view of, and I'll make this up, if there's 10 parts of a journey of buying a car, from my perspective, every retailer should be able to offer all 10 of those aspects to be able to buy a car through a digital process. The reality is that if you took 10 people in a room, they would all probably navigate that differently. One in the room may decide to go through online. Others will dip and dip out of the process as they see fit. So you have to have, in my opinion, all of the necessary requirements to go online. I just think that people still want to, and the most people still want to engage physically by going into a showroom, talking to the retailer, maybe touching and feeling the car. But we do know, and we're seeing it. I mean, Cazoo are now saying that they've sold over 10,000 cars, haven't they? And they've been operating now for 11 months.
Yeah.
Clearly there's a market there, but I think we just need to make sure that don't get carried away, that still will be a small proportion of car transactions and used car transactions, or certainly new car transactions for the foreseeable future.
Do you think customers will ever be completely comfortable with doing that whole purchase online, and especially when it comes to used cars, because they're all very different, aren't they? I mean, people like to see and feel and try these cars. I just wonder whether there will ever be a point when those customers are completely happy to do all of it online. I mean, what I'm trying to get to is, do you think there will always be space for dealers in the way that they're operating at the moment?
I mean, I personally believe there will always be space for the retailers. And I think retailers, as you see it today, yes, they've got to rethink their business model. And yes, they've got to think about how they then engage with the OEMs in all of this, thinking about how they transact in a digital model. Because we're not just talking, obviously, we talk about used, but we've also got to think about the new car transactions and how they effectively need to blend together to make how either OEMs change their model and retailers. But there will always, from my perspective, there is a need for the retailer in the market, and there will be for the foreseeable future. And I can't see that all of a sudden the general retailers that we see today will be gone and everything will just be done on an online cloud environment. I can't see that, but we have to be aware that there is a growing trend to that, and it will accelerate. But whether that's over the next 5, 10 or 15 years.
So what would be your thoughts on this agency model that some manufacturers are really pushing? I mean, Tesla have clearly done it very, very successfully. I mean, they do it all themselves. But there's stories today from BMW suggesting that they may even be interested in doing something similar. I mean, some would say that the customer should be owned by the manufacturer. That first point of contact should be with the manufacturer, and that sale should be done by them. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think we need to, with everything that's going on in the environment from the automotive industry right now, we've got OEMs are struggling to find their way with all of the challenges, the needs for investment, the R&D, the online selling, the way in which they engage with their retailers in the marketplace. But I think both have to come to the table and think about an agency model would possibly have legs, but you still need the retailer in the marketplace. And with an agency model, they need to find a path that still allows the retailer to be able to keep the levels of margins, or if possible, improve the margins that the retailers can actually get in the market and through their business models. And we talked about BMW, and they've taken it in some markets. They seem to, I think the article was on South Africa, and it's actually has been worked pretty well. When you say Tesla, other manufacturers, to be fair, have tried the agency model, and it's not been a success, and it's failed. And I think what they need to do, OEMs and retailers need to come together and work this through, and actually look at it as more about how do they approach this in the marketplace as a consumer, as a team. If they do this in isolation, then I think you then create that divide. And I think that's where you start creating these frictions in the marketplace. And, one thing you would say, even through this period of, let's say, lockdown, I think there's probably been an appreciation of the OEMs certainly need the retailers in the market. And I think there's almost been sort of a leveling up of just how much they need each other in to get the car sales and get the consumer through the door and engaging with the consumer. So if they work together on this, I think both parties can win. And that's what they just need to continue to do, is keep talking.
It does certainly feel like sometimes they're pulling in opposite directions, doesn't it? But I certainly see what you mean. Martin, I know you've been in this president role since May, and I mean that's mostly been through lockdown. But have you actually seen anything in any other markets, or have you been shown anything in any other markets that you think UK dealers could learn from?
Look, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, you can imagine, I think it was 1st of May. So I'm taking over on an international role where I guess the world and global economy and automation is we're all on lockdown, and this pandemic has spread, and each market's run at its different levels and at different paces. So, I have sat in this office. I haven't been on a plane, as you can imagine. So I haven't been out in those markets. But what I have done, and what I guess working in front of teams, it allows you actually to probably spend more time getting up to speed of what's going on in the market with our businesses, rather than necessarily time on a plane or on a train or in a car traveling. I mean, what we are seeing in general markets, I mean, one I would know, you have to look at China, and we do have investments in China. So what we regard is we're not there necessarily in a big way. We have 2 brands, which is RMS and Modix in China. And we also have some investments, which we regard as, I would say, listening posts. And those listening posts allow us to understand what's going on in the China economy, what's going on in the China automotive market. Now, they obviously hit COVID first. They rebounded the quickest out of this on that particular, what was seen as a V-type recovery. And I think we need to watch what China are doing at, certainly when you look at China and the EV market. So there's lots to learn in sense there. And what I think you'll see is the EV market, and they don't seem to have the restrictions like, I guess, the Western world. And I think you'll see more influence from China, certainly in the EV market, and also when it comes to things like batteries. I think that will see, and I think we'll see more evolve from China into different markets across the international footprint. I think upstream has been a big point. And what I mean by that is, OEMs are trying to understand, instead of the typical businesses like we run, where you get a lot more of those used cars going through perhaps different third market channels like auction itself for their franchise market to buy. I think OEMs across all the markets now are looking to how do they pull their used car inventory and actually find different ways in which they can get that used car inventory out into their markets place for those franchise and retailers to actually then buy, rather than maybe going through the traditional channels such as auction. And we're seeing that in Europe. You can imagine Europe, they're sort of pooling their resources across all markets to understand that. I think subscription models, I think certainly in markets like the USA, I think that sort of subscription model has taken more of a hold, and there's probably more appetite with regards to not so much ownership, but more about usability and the user model in that. And I think the economic model works better in the US when you look at those mobility as a service. So we've really seen that start to take hold, although I would say COVID has probably put a little bit of a slowed down that trend. I think what we're seeing with regards to that mobility will start to transform in other markets and come to the UK. Digital retail clearly is a big topic in every market that we've looked at. So I think that will continue to move.
Martin, what are your thoughts now on the assistance the government could give to the UK marketplace with the second lockdown now in place? New car sales figures going to be incredibly down this year. Do you think there's an argument now for this industry to get some support, or do you think the fact that the industry had such a rebound in quarter three that they've sort of talked themselves out of support going forward?
Look, what I would say is I think the government do need to look closer at the support that they are giving into the automotive industry. If you look at what the contribution that we bring as a business to the UK economy in itself, and I'll use a couple of examples, but if you think, we've lost 22.5 billion in revenues been lost this year through COVID. Now, we know that we've ended up having that spike, and it probably hasn't helped the argument so much with the government to say that you need help, because a lot of big dealer groups right now are actually going to announce, and you have seen the announcement on many of the bigger sort of listed companies of really strong financial results coming out of this. But I do believe personally that that's not a V shape. I believe we're in a W shape economy. And I think as you sort of look at where we've got things like Brexit, we've got still the impact of COVID, we've got the impact of the unemployment rates, we're going to have the whole impact of confidence will reduce from the consumer confidence angle. I think we need to be wary of that. We will start to see, and we are already starting to see it, come this sort of as we finish the year, that slowdown of activity from a retail, slowdown from activity that we see in relation to a wholesale. And I think we need to be careful about what that looks like for Q1. Now, I'll just give a prime example how I feel. If you look at we've talked about lockdown version 2, and I know people have been advocates of, talking about this, but I still can't hold how DIY stores or garden centres have been permitted to still do business as usual, when car retailers, which arguably I'd say that you get less footfall, they can control the footfall in a much better way. Their health and safety standards that they can just manage because of the environment they're in is far greater. How they haven't been allowed to open, and we've been allowed, although it be a click and collect, I don't understand how the government can actually just differentiate and not look at the automotive industry at that level of detail and understand that they're not helping them. It drives an enormous amount of employment and contributions to GDP in this marketplace. And I think it does need help and assistance. And I think it's up to the bodies like the SMMT and others to actually drive that support. And I think if they don't do, I think they will be missing a trick, and it will hurt not only the automotive industry, but I think it will hurt the wider economy. Yeah, it's such a shame that those dealers couldn't remain open. I mean, one of the most popular stories on our website was the one that exactly said that. Why can garden centres stay open and car dealers can't? It's continued to be our most popular story, because I think a lot of people out there are thinking exactly the same thing. Martin, what would be your request to the government for support for automotive industry? What would you like to see? Is it a scrappage scheme? Is it a VAT cut for cars? Is it something that incentivises green cars further? What would work, and what would it look like if you were asking for it? Well, what I would say is, I mean, there's a number of things there, James. I mean, first of all, let's just be really careful. I know we've just Boris has just announced that now the cut of the petrol and the diesel new cells by effectively what we believe it to be is 2030, and maybe hybrids by 2035. That's certainly not helping. And I know that we have a need to cut emissions in the marketplace, but our infrastructure in the ecosystem is all built on the internal combustion engine. And I think we need to be really realistic about the timelines of dragging that forward, which is now effectively within the next sort of less than a decade. And I don't think they truly, and that's certainly not going to help. I definitely think they need to look at things like scrappage schemes. I would like to see them work more closely and listen more closely to the likes of the SMMT, the NFDA and others, and really sit down at the table and listen to the contribution that we bring into the marketplace. VAT is going to be an issue, And you've already seen the likes of issues with Brexit. And what does that also do with regards to some of the VAT schemes? There's obviously that announcement recently how it's going to be very penal to our dealers in Northern Ireland, for example, but also against how that Brexit will allow that flow of new vehicles coming into the marketplace. We know manufacturing has been down for new vehicles. So my plea would be to the government is to please sit down with the various governing bodies of the automotive industry. Please sit down and listen carefully to some of the, the big leaders of the retailers in the marketplace, of certainly are, those sort of AM top 110, top 20, because they should listen to what they're saying and their advice. And I think they do need to act. And if we sort of stick their head in the sands and they don't help this market, as I said before, I think the automotive industry will suffer, but that we know will have a knock-on effect to the way that the UK economy will react and be able to rebound from what we're sort of in the period that we are in today.
And you touched on the subject there. Brexit is obviously just around the corner. I read a piece at the weekend that said if we thought coronavirus was bad, wait until we look at a no deal Brexit. What do you think will happen there, and what sort of impact could it have on the car industry?
Well, I mean, I've made the mistake before, James, of giving my view on what I thought was going to be happening on Brexit, and I think I've got it wrong every time. So I don't necessarily be careful what I say. I mean, I think what we do know is, look, I'm forever hopeful that the UK government and Boris can work with on a Brexit deal that allows and takes into consideration the impact to many of our industries, obviously in the UK, not only, but obviously the one we're most interested in, the automotive industry. I think if we get this wrong, I think it will have a big dramatic effect on certainly the sale of new cars. And I think obviously then the related facts of new cars. And if you look at our forecast in our insight report, we sort of are looking at a forecast for used and new cars next year, and we give 3 indications of where we think was sort of like high, probably most likely, and low. And I think one of the biggest points on that is the impact of Brexit. And I think if Brexit and we exit hard way, we know that it will have a dramatic impact on the level of activity in the marketplace. And again, it goes back to that whole point. It's not only where the government have got to take into a point where we are today with the COVID-19 situation and impact, but also with Brexit. And if you put those two together, even more reason they do need to sit down and listen to the experts and people that know our industry and know what the impact this will have. And I just believe it will have a dramatic impact. But I have to say, I will state there with confidence in a sense, I think they will come to some element of a deal, but I don't think it will, I still think it will have some elements of impact to this marketplace.
I do hope they do, because I don't think we can, as a country and an industry, afford not to have one. You touched on it there on your predictions for next year. I note that some of them are actually slightly more bullish than the SMMTs for next year. Perhaps we could just talk through that a little bit on the new car market. What do you think in 2021 is going to look like?
Yeah, so I mean, if you look at the new car market, I mean, don't forget we're looking at where we think it's going to end this year, and those figures are published, but I think we're coming at a figure of about 1.75 million, which you think about what was 2019 was about 2.3 million. So you're looking at over 30% reduction this year in use. And I think I referenced the point before, if you look at what that is, a loss of sales of revenue to this marketplace, that's 22.5 billion that we sort of look at as loss in revenue here. I think if you look in 2021, again, it all depends on things like the COVID, when we can come out of lockdown, Brexit aspects in a sense. But from a new car marketplace, we're looking at probably a growth in there. And we're probably being as bullish as to say that we think we will see an increase up to potentially 2 million. Now, again, that will be a reduction from 2019 and 2018, which is, we know that was falling around 2.4 and then 2.3. So still pullback, but we do believe you'll see more activity this year. Now, don't get me wrong. that will fall to potentially 1.7 million if we see all the impacts of the COVID and the Brexit and the lack of government support. But we like to think that if we can get that right, 2 million is maybe the right benchmark as we see that through. And I think obviously that will pick up as the year goes on.
I mean, that would certainly be. I think a lot of dealers would take that at the moment. What about the used car market? I mean, what would be your headlines there, and what's going to happen?
Well, we see again. I mean, we know this year. I mean, this is news, isn't it? We all know that our retailers know, the industry know, the used cars have certainly held up better than used new cars this year. We're predicting about 6.4 million this year. And if you look at the start of the year, we were forecasting, I think it was like 7.99 million, 8 million of cars. So clearly that's been impacted and it's come down. But again, given what we think the most likely scenario is, we do see that picking up slightly from 6.4 to around probably 6.6, 6.7 million in the market. So because of, I think it's just been more robust this year, we don't necessarily see the increases quite as heavy as we have previously.
And do you think those buoyant used car prices are going to remain too? I mean, that's been one thing that's been particularly pleasing for dealers, is that it is the price of the used cars they've had on the forecourt, and the ones they've been able to sell have actually been a lot more than they expected. Think that's going to continue?
You know, Joe, and I'll be open honestly. When we went into that first original lockdown, I mean, I was really concerned. I think, like most, thought where used car values were going to go. Interestingly, there's some in the market that I was talking to that actually saw it the other way round and thought that the car market would stay strong. And look, I kind of got that wrong. I think that used car markets next year will start to have to normalise. And, you know, let's take LCVs out in a sense, because I think that probably stays more robust and strong just from the sheer demand from the used market. But I do think as you start to see a softening in the actual retail space for used, and you start to see that come, I think we now need to start to see some sort of adjustment as those prices come down. But I'm holding on that it won't be, you know, it won't fall off a cliff. And it will be managed well by those in the marketplace. It will be managed well by those that obviously have some control over it, the likes of the caps and the auto traders and everyone that give those sort of predictions on that data. I'd like to think it literally isn't going to fall off a cliff. But we have to appreciate it can't keep doing what it's been doing. But with any luck, because of just the sheer sort of supply in the marketplace, you know, we know that it's a supply and demand factor as well. And we are seeing lack of supply at the moment, which, although demand's not great, it still kind of keeps those prices at a reasonable level.
I think we can both agree that it's been a rather crazy year this year, to put it lightly. But if we were chatting to dealers and you were to say to them, look, this is what you should plan for as being the new normal, what would you say that looks like? I mean, is the situation we're in at the moment with the click and collect and the online sales, is that going to continue, or will we go back to what we had in January, February time ever?
No, I have to believe that. Look, I think what we're seeing today, I mean, all of these trends, James, you'll agree that all of these trends aren't new trends. They were trends that we've been talking about for a long time. What I just think that's happened this year is that these trends have accelerated dramatically. So we know that retailers had to get more savvy in the digital environment. And the automotive industry, as I came into it, as you talk about the previous, when we started, when I came into automotive, I was surprised with perhaps, maybe I'd say the better phrase, lack of advancement or adoption of a digital environment compared to most of the other industries I've either worked with from before or from a digital presence. This year, they've been forced to speed that up. And I've been really impressed. I have to say, I've been really impressed with how the retailers have adapted so quickly and changed some of their models and brought this digital retail environment in. And more so, again, that important point of blending that offline and online. I think that's here to stay. And I think what we now need to do is embrace that change. And, you know, they say, don't let a good crisis go to waste. This has got, I think, what retailers, and I'm hearing from retailers, they are actually coming out of this as stronger businesses.
Yeah.
they realize that there are things that they used to do that they don't need to do to still be able to deliver the right customer experience, the right level of service, the right level of journey through the car sales process and through the after sales process, and whilst the manner in which they work with the OEMs. Let's not go back into those things where we're building processes and unnecessary processes in and cost into our businesses and relationships with retailers and OEMs that existed before COVID, because that would be a shame. And I don't think anyone will do, because I think everyone's seeing the benefits of digital. And you'll see this. We know our business is seeing the benefits of digital. And, you know, I don't necessarily want our business, for example, to go back to where it was pre-COVID. I think some really good things have come out of this. And I just think if we embrace them, we've now got an opportunity to build on them. And I think it's better for the retailer. I think it'll be better for the OEM. I think it'd be better for the fleet and leasing businesses, and it'd be better for third-party suppliers. So I would say embrace the trends, don't lose momentum, don't fall back into own ways, and keep now innovating your business, because those that continue that and innovate the quickest will be the ones that come out stronger out of this.
It's been a good chance for a lot of businesses to just have a reset, hasn't it, and re-look at their business and work out how to do things differently. I'm sure that's been the same for you, Martin, too. I mean, how has this pandemic and the situation that we've been changed what you do as a business?
Yeah, and James, look, I'll, you know, again, open, honest, direct in this. When I look at it, I mean, I made a statement, and I looked at it back in, I think it was the 20th of March. I made a statement out in the marketplace that said by 2023, 2024, I would expect 80% of wholesale to be online, fully online. Now, whether that was 2023 or 24 or 25, or whether it was 80%, 60, 70, but it was the sense of direction that I was trying to give, not be pinned down on exactly those numbers and dates. If we sit here today, 100% of our wholesale marketplace is sold online. Now, that happened instantly at the point that we came out and we were allowed to operate when we came down out of the first lockdown. We have sold, you've seen this, we've had record conversion rates, we've had record valuations and values and residual values for the cars. We obviously have to make our model more effective for that full online environment to get the buyers more comfortable. But we also see the benefits and the efficiencies for our business of not having to run a car through a physical auction hall. Yeah. There are efficiencies that we gain from doing that. And I think personally, if we end up having to go all the way back to physical auctions and not embrace some of this change, then I think that, again, we would let a good crisis go to waste for our industry, for our business, and I think for other businesses out there. And I just think what we, again, have to do, as I said before, is we just need to get better at running a digital kind of proposition to make sure our customers, our buyers, our vendors are getting an even better experience through digital. And we're still having to go through that, and we will still continue to work on that from 21, 22 and beyond. But it has had an impact. But we, again, I believe we will come out of this, not just from UK, but globally, we will come out of this a much stronger business, and I think better positioned to deliver the needs and the proposition of our customers.
Will you go back to those physical auctions?
Look, I think, you can't say. I would think that in an ideal world, I'd say that you wouldn't go back to a physical auction world. Now, you'd have to look at what the rest of the market does. You have to look at what our competitors do. You have to listen to our customers and our buyers. But if we can find a way that satisfies their needs, then I would say I would rather move much more and embrace this digital environment. Look, there may be sometimes in some element of cars that you might have to have some sort of physical auction presence. But I think to the most part, I think we have to embrace that digital shift and maintain to grow off it.
Because, I mean, I look at the classic car world, for example, classic car auctions, they don't really work online. You know, you want to go and see them, you want to feel them, the viewing is very, very important. But what you specialize in, it's not really important, is it? And you're proving it can work.
Well, I mean, that's right. And if you think about, look, there's stock that we might get from fleet and leasing businesses or OEMs, and they could be anything young and used from 6 months, and they could be maybe 2 or 3 years old. Do you know what? That is generally good stock. And if you can get the inspection report right, you can get the images correct, the 360 photography and everything else around that, people should be able to could be comfortable to buy. I think it's as you start to enter into the sort of the older cars with higher mileage, I think that that's where you may see that people may want to necessarily go and still feel and touch a car. But again, it's on us to provide that comfort levels and maybe changing proposition that you could still run that in an online environment. And look, people have been buying them and buying, and fighting for them, no matter whether they're a 6-month car or whether they're a 10-year-old car with high mileage, they are selling through the lanes. So we know it works, and we know that we can deliver that proposition to buyers and vendors.
And when do you think you're going to have to make a decision on what you do going forward? I mean, is it a case of when we're in lockdown we don't change, or are you constantly assessing this?
I think look, we will constantly assess. We will constantly listen to our vendors and our buyers in the marketplace. We will constantly look at our competitors of what they're doing in this space as well. And I think what we should be doing also is as a body, as an armour body, we should be working together on this as well, and not necessarily trying to work at odds. We all service our buyers and buyers and vendors. There's enough of us to all work in the market. We should work together on what we believe as an industry is the best way to serve the vendor and the buyer and our customers. So, we will just continue to watch, James, and be reactive and stay agile to the market.
Yeah. What about the immediate future in terms of lockdowns? What are your thoughts on this one that we're currently in at the moment? Do you think we're going to be coming out of it on December the 2nd, as was originally planned?
So if you think about, if I take it, if the whole country's on a tier 4 now, do I think the whole country will move out of tier 4 on the 2nd of December? Personally, no. What you may see, if you do see, you may see some pockets of the country where they feel that certain levels may move into a tier 3. You may then move into a tier 2. So I think what you won't see is a blanket, everyone's moved from tier 4 to a tier 3 or tier 2. So I think it will come out in that. And look, if you look at the moment from what we're seeing as, again, cases, hospitalizations, deaths, there's nothing right now that would suddenly say in a couple of weeks' time, we're certainly going back to normal.
And if in that tier 4, do you think the dealers should be allowed to be open?
My personal opinion is without a doubt. I mean, beyond doubt, if they're going to continue to keep stores like the DIY stores and garden centres open, I would struggle to understand that the government shouldn't look at the policy and understand why the retailer can't open. And I feel passionate about that.
Surely the industry needs to come out fighting for that, because I mean, you would think the very fact that garden centres and DIY stores are open now means that the car industry sort of did lose the fight on this one, didn't they? This current lockdown.
Yeah, they did. And that's, I mean, to be honest, and that's what worries me. And it goes back to all your previous points, James, is are the government listening to us in the automotive industry properly? And are what we're saying, is it falling on deaf ears? And if you look at something as obvious, in my mind, as obvious as that sort of the garden centre DIYs, and not to allow the retailers to open their doors, are they then seeing all the other aspects that we're saying, where we need some assistance, we need some help with regards to what we bring to this economy? If that's fallen on deaf ears, will this continue to fall on deaf ears? And we cannot allow that to happen. And we need to be strong. We need to continue to talk to the government. We need to lobby. We need to push. But that takes every aspect, from governing bodies to the retailers themselves, to companies like us and others in the marketplace, to make sure that we stand up for this industry and we fight.
Yeah, fingers crossed that does happen. Finally, Martin, let's finish on some positives. We've covered a huge amount there. The insight report we've obviously covered, and we will make sure that there's a link in this article for people to be able to see it.
Right.
Let's look at 2021. What are the good things to look forward to if you're running a car dealer right now?
Well, look, I think we've got to see, I think once we've ride probably the maybe a wave or of Q1, as we come out of that, I think we are predicting, I think we've got an opportunity if we get this right. I think new car sales will increase. I think we will see more activity with the used car transactions. So I think if retailers have seen a good period coming out of the COVID position, I think cost bases and the way that they're operating now is more efficient. So I think you should see more activity and a better environment for them. I think OEMs will start to actually clear some of what their kind of strategy should be. I think they should all have opportunities through their nail the digital retail experience, and they get much closer to it. And I think as well, I think they'd have to start to embrace things like as well subscription models, so they need to continue to evolve. But look, the vaccine we're hearing good news. We'll be coming out of Q1, we'll be heading into a spring. I think if we can get it right and we can get confidence levels back up, I think 2021, if we get the right support, could be actually a great year to see us come back again as we've headed back down from that sort of W curve, and hopefully pick it back up. And I think once we climb out of that for 2021, we will catch up on the economy and we will see further growth in 2022. And I think it's just positives that we should be seeing in the marketplace for us right now. But we just need to ride the rest of the year out, be careful in Q1 and don't get carried away with ourselves. I think if we're careful on that and we come out of it, I think we can have a great year.
Well, fingers crossed we do. Martin, thank you very much indeed for talking to us today. We'll make sure there's a link to that insight report, and thanks for sharing those early insights into it for us. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thanks, James.
Great stuff. So super. Thank you very much to Martin there. If you want more Car Dealer Live like this one, you can log on to cardealermagazine.co.uk and click on the live tab at the top of the page. And if you want to be involved in them, you can email me. It's james@blackballmedia.co.uk. Find me on Twitter @CarDealerEd or James Baggott on LinkedIn. Thanks ever so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.